It's lovely to be here in Portland to talk about my book. This is the book, Living as a River. Apparently I wrote it, and that might seem like a slightly strange thing to say, but I don't know if you've ever done much writing, but there can be this strange sensation when you go back and read something that you've written and you think, oh, that's interesting. Or, yeah, that kind of sensation. Or, oh, wow, who wrote that? That's good, I like that. And, well, mostly it's like that. Or it's like, oh, okay, sometimes it's like, who wrote that? Oh my goodness. What was I thinking? There's this strange unfamiliarity sometimes when you go back and look at your own writing, as if it's somebody else that wrote it. There are passages that I don't remember, and I get this shock, this surprise of, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's kind of startling and new and fresh and strange. And it's a book about our identities, about ourselves. And so that's actually kind of a teaching in itself, almost. I'm not the same person I was when I started writing the book. There are passages, as I say, that I don't even remember at times. That person that started writing the book, and I started writing it a little over 2 years ago, that person is, in many respects, a stranger to me. I'm not the same person that I was. And that isn't, this kind of perspective isn't unique just to writing. I mean, often we're strangers to ourselves in many ways. Right now, for example, I'm sitting here talking to you. I do have some notes, but I'm often not referring to the notes, and words are just appearing. I don't have a sense that I know what I'm going to say next. When you hear the words coming up, that's when I hear the words coming up. When you know what I've just said, that's when I know what I've just said as well. It's very interesting. We tend to think that we have this authorship of our words, that we've kind of consciously brought them into being, as if somehow there's this queue of words that I'm building up, consciously building up, and then you get to hear them. But it's not like that most of the time. It's just very spontaneous, and in a way it's not me speaking, because right now I am witnessing speech happening. I don't have the sense that I am speaking. And it's mysterious and strange. And ourselves, even though we take ourselves for granted and we think we know ourselves a lot of the time, ourselves are actually quite strange and mysterious and indefinable. Thoreau said, nothing was ever so unfamiliar and startling to me as my own thoughts. And I think that's true. That's what I'm talking about right now. And again, this is something that we perhaps take for granted. Do you know what you're going to be feeling in 5 minutes? You know, but suddenly you start feeling things. Something happens and an emotion comes up. You didn't make that emotion happen. It just came into being. Again, we kind of tend to have the sense of authorship, ownership, as if we do all this stuff. But really we're just kind of witnessing what is happening within us a lot of the time. Nevertheless, my name is on the book and I get the royalties, which is kind of nice. And I'm generally pleased with the book as well. When I read it, it's mostly a pleasant surprise of, oh, this is interesting. Oh, I like that, which is good. So I like the person's writing, this person, you know, over the last few years who's been doing the writing, and I enjoy it. I know that the process of writing changed me quite a lot. As I said, I'm not the same person I was when I started writing the book. You can't spend 2 years reflecting on the nature of the self without something changing in your sense of yourself, or your sense of what the self is. Writing the book has challenged my views about the self. I started off on some level, having a sense that I had this thing called a self, which was separate and relatively, permanent. I didn't really want to have that view, and I wasn't even aware that I had it, in a way. That's probably the best way of putting it. I wasn't even aware that I had that view until at some point that kind of snapped. Since writing it and during writing it, I just started perceiving myself in a different way. The kind of things that I've been talking about, of looking back and seeing my own writing and thinking, I didn't know I knew that. This sense of being a witness to my own words, my own thoughts, my own emotions, my own actions coming into being, and being a witness of that, and not really having a sense of ownership of them. That's the kind of thing that's changed a lot as I was writing the book. I want to read you a little bit of the book. This is the chapter on the consciousness element. I'll say a little bit more about these elements a little later on. It's just an illustration of a kind of a practical experience of non-self. So I'm driving along the long, winding and rather monotonous US Route 4 in New Hampshire, on my way to teach a class at the men's prison in Concord. It's easy to space out, and as usual, I'm trying to turn the act of driving into a mindfulness practice. The radio is switched off. I'm not listening to any podcasts. I'm not eating or drinking. I'm trying not to multitask in any way. I simply pay attention to what's going on as I drive. I notice the physical sensations in my body. When another driver comes too close or makes a risky maneuver, I notice the emotions that excuse me. I notice the emotions that arise. Sounds like I'm getting very emotional, but I'm not. Just a bit of cookie caught in my throat. Excuse me. I notice the emotions that arise and let go of them as best I can, while wishing both of us well. I pay attention, of course, to what I'm seeing in front of me and in my car's mirrors. Noticing how my gaze can often fixate on a narrow area in front of me, I become aware of the entirety of my visual field, allowing into awareness everything from the centre of my visual field to the periphery. It's like moving from a kind of dial-up connection between the world and my brain to a broadband one. Doing this generally has a very calming effect on my inner chatter, as if the sheer volume of incoming data I'm paying attention to leaves no bandwidth available for my inner dramas. So as I expand my awareness of my visual field, I notice a marked decrease in my inner monologues. A sense of spaciousness arises in my experience. I become distracted less frequently, and it's easier to keep my awareness in the present moment. Driving mindfully like this, I'm simultaneously aware of the curve of the road, of the vehicles ahead of me, and of the never-ending trees, buildings, signs, and utility poles that flow past me. My mind is quiet and yet full of sensory impressions. Then I notice a curious thing. I can see my hands on the steering wheel at the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock positions. I can see the steering wheel turning clockwise and counterclockwise with my hands upon it. I can feel my hands and arms moving, and yet I have no sense that I am making these movements. I'm not aware of giving my hands and arms any conscious or explicit directions. They seem to move of their own volition. They seem to have minds of their own. And yet they're making precisely the movements needed to keep the car in its lane. There's an intelligence at work here, and yet it's not under conscious direction. The realization is fascinating, and it's so hilarious that for the next few miles I keep bursting into laughter. So who's driving the car? It's certainly not my conscious self, because my conscious self has only just noticed that my hands are moving. My conscious self has been too absorbed with being mindful of my driving to bother about such trivial details as the physical movements involved in, well, the act of driving. But now I'm captivated by these movements, observing in the periphery of my visual field these two hands skillfully moving the steering wheel to the left and to the right, without any intervention, as if the hands belonged to someone else. Who is this stranger with whom I'm sharing a driver's seat, sharing a body? With deft finesse, he coordinates the movements of my feet on the pedals and my right hand on the gear stick. It's clearly my body that's involved in the act of driving, but my conscious mind, which I often identify with as being myself, doesn't seem to be doing anything but observing. It's rather spooky, this sense that I am not driving the car. It's as though my conscious awareness is sharing a body with a zombie or robot who does most of the grunt work. It's as if I'm simultaneously awake and sleepwalking. It's like a kind of spirit possession. I feel almost that I'm in the presence of another. Someone else is moving the steering wheel. Someone else is pressing the gas, brake and clutch pedals. Someone else reaches down at the appropriate moment and slides the gear stick forward from fourth gear to third. The only reassuring thing about this is that he seems to be a good driver. These signs of non-self seem to be around us all the time. It's just that we ignore them. We don't pay attention to them. We have a very fixed idea about who we are, what we're doing, and that we're in control. And I think it's only at times when perhaps we're being more kind of, mindful, like being so mindful that we're not really noticing what we're doing, that you begin to realise that there's a lot of automation in us. There's a lot of stuff going on that's outside of our conscious control.